right. Hello. All right. Looks like we have about 14 people in here. Um, just if it's okay, everyone could just say hi in the chat so I know folks are here. I would appreciate it. Just also so you know, throughout this whole thing, hello, Amanda. Um, if anytime you have a question, feel free to throw it in the chat or unmute, raise your hand. I'm okay with it with either. Hello, Alexander. Hello, Clint. So today I want to talk a little bit about Twine. I've noticed looking at the abstracts, hello, Cassie. Looking at the abstracts, the one on the session says I'm presenting with Dr. Margaret Sullivan. The one on, if you click to see more, says I'm presenting with Dr. Kristen Lovis, who's the Director of Digital Humanities at Marshall University. Due to usual sort of university things that can happen during the summer, neither of them were able to make it. So therefore I'm doing the presentation. I've worked extensively with using sort of tech in the classroom. Hello, Sophie and Vanessa. And I also, with Dr. Margaret Sullivan, have judged these annual SCORES competition for state of West Virginia. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about using Twine today. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I did put together a little bit of a presentation. Hopefully everything kind of works all right on this. Okay. All right. So the name of this session, string us along on Tales Told Twine. I want to focus on using Twine for both assignments, so things that you can assign your students, but also as a way for you to create materials. And so hopefully in this session, we can kind of learn to do both. I want to try to devote a big chunk of the time to that. But before I get to the actual kind of playing around with Twine and creating your sort of own sort of Twine games, I want to kind of give a little bit of a background. So first, Twine is a visual coding environment that's very accessible and easy to use. My students who have never used it before and have no experience coding managed to take to it right away and develop some really cool projects. Some colleagues of mine have also used it to create basically materials for their class. So today's sort of presentation, I want to kind of go over just a few things. As I said, first, I want to talk about video games, electronic literature, and Twine. And all these three go together, and they exist kind of along sort of a spectrum. I then want to show some samples, both a couple student samples and a sample from a colleague of mine of using Twine in the classroom. And I hope the biggest chunk we'll use on sort of building your own narrative-based Twine games. And so, I want to start sort of with video games, eLit, and Twine. And I want to give you just a sort of a bit of background on all of these three things, since they are related. So really quick in the chat, if that's okay, would you please let me know how old do you think video games or computer games are? Like as a mode or a medium, how long have we been playing computer games and video games? If you want to throw a decade or a number of years, if you just throw it into the chat, kind of like to get just an idea. 45 years, all right. Oh wow, a bunch of them. 70s, 80s, 40 to 50 years now. Yeah, 100 years. You're not far off. Yeah, playing them as a kid. That's actually one of the reasons why I like using Twine, is I have a lot of memories of playing video games as a kid, and it actually makes, I think, for a fun way to kind of connect with students. 50 years, all right. I mention this because I think a lot of times we don't really understand the full sort of history. And luckily, this website here, the Museum of Play, or Museum of Play has a website where they kind of have a really brief history if it's something you want to kind of give to your students. Where it actually kind of talks about computer games and video games. Obviously not video, but more computer games. Going back to as far as like 1940, which I know whenever I kind of learned stuff like that, I always found it really kind of interesting that it went back that far. I went ahead and threw that link into the chat, which I'll continue doing as we go through. So the 40, so that's almost 80 years, right? I think that's quite a while. So they've been around for a while, but we still have this sort of idea that they're new a lot of times. I know I've encountered that sometimes with both students and other teachers, like that they think they're a new thing sometimes. And so I kind of wanted to talk about those. Where we get to sort of electronic literature, it's not quite the same thing as video games, but it is kind of very related. And I have, let me see here. Yeah. I have a couple sort of really chunky quotes I want to show you on the screen real quick. Don't worry. With these quotes, I will give you sort of some resources to kind of read these later on your own time. So first, we have this quote from Retberg that really tries to set sort of like how this started, how electronic literature started. And it's similar to video games, but it's more about how we read and interact with texts that are narrative driven, but kind of created digitally. Next, Catherine Hale's researcher tries to kind of determine sort of the difference between sort of electronic literature from print literature. And that's kind of where she's coming at this with this sort of chunky quote from her article. And then I have another quote from the Electronic Literature Organization. And it kind of attempts to sort of define sort of what ELIT or electronic literature is. And these three taken together, I think, help kind of bridge what maybe we're all familiar with when it comes to video games to what I want to kind of do with today, which is with Twine, you can kind of create these you can create complex narratives, but you can also do, and a lot of times for my purposes, a lot sort of simpler narratives to sort of as assignments and for class materials. Alexander, yes, depends what you consider a computer, because I mean, go back to the counting machine and the Ada Lovelace. So let me see. Going sort of next here, I have this, which is where I kind of got these quotes from. This was a course made by a colleague of mine. I believe it was Dr. Lilvis. Kind of determining sort of what is and isn't electronic literature. And according to the Electronic Literature Organization, a lot of the stuff you would read on the web, because it has the ability to link and jump through to another page, that would be considered electronic literature. A lot of sort of art, visual art you find on the internet, things like that. Even things that take sort of novels that are sort of in a digital first format, where they are actually taking advantage of some aspect of internet. So if it was like a novel on Twitter or an essay on Twitter, that could technically be electronic literature. So there's a wide way to think of this. And Hales talks about sort of video games, because, I'm sure as most of you are, if you've thought about this at all, kind of now that I'm talking about it, there are many video games that are very much like, say, like a football video game. Madden is not really electronic literature because there's not a strong narrative component to that game. However, maybe a narrative focused game would be considered electronic literature. And so I just want to get a little bit of that out of the way to kind of talk about sort of how I approach using Twine and sort of electronic literature in the classroom. I want to go ahead and pause just for a second. Are there any questions so far? Just remember, if you have any, throw them into the chat, and I'll get to them as I see them, because it kind of has a little running list here beside me. But if not, I'll continue. If you have any questions, please let me know. Before we kind of move on away from sort of electronic literature, one thing I want to kind of show to you is, let me first throw this into the chat. And that is the page I was just showing you. And then I have another page here. If you are interested after this on kind of finding more resources for teaching electronic literature, the ELO, they have a great webpage with a bunch of sources and works to kind of get you started, as well as sample syllabi and all manner of sort of materials to kind of help you. Oh, I thought I mentioned it. I probably skipped over. I get nervous at the beginning. Thank you, Alexander. I teach freshman composition mainly, so first and second year beginning and advanced composition to Marshall University's incoming first year students. I also teach a lot of general education lit classes, and in the last few years, I've been teaching more of the sort of digital humanities focused classes. Which digital humanities is a broad topic, its own field, much like electronic literature, that basically looks at sort of how the humanities and technology interact to solve problems. So how can we use technology to solve humanities related questions and problems? How can we use humanities focused lenses and processes to help look at technology? It's kind of where we go. I apologize. I get kind of carried away. Yeah, so the second link I threw there right now, the teach.eliterature.org, has a lot of materials that can kind of help you out. A lot of samples of things that are kind of a little bit more involved in what we're doing today. But if you're interested. Okay. And all right. So yeah, now I want to kind of talk a little bit about sort of using Twine in the classroom. So the first thing I want to show you here is what one of these look like. Now, a lot of times we want to kind of start with sort of like how to build it so you can get to sort of what you see. I think sometimes, even though it's fairly straightforward, the technological component can be a little overwhelming. So I want to kind of show you what these can look like, using some samples from my students and from a colleague. And then we're going to dig into sort of how to make them. I hope that's okay. And again, if you have any questions as we go through, throw them in the chat, or if you want to unmute, raise your hand, whatever. So I want to first show this sample from one of my students. I unfortunately don't have permission to kind of actually share the file with you, but my students in a digital literary studies class that we took this past spring were tasked with creating their own twines. And I have two samples that I want to kind of show you. The first sample is from a student of mine, Molly Thompson, who's really into sort of horror and sort of spooky stories. And the assignment essentially was that they had to create their own story or narrative-based Twine game. That's all they had to do. Create their own narrative-based Twine game. And I had a bunch of different responses. And this one I thought was kind of interesting to show sort of how straightforward Twine can be. She didn't really adjust any of the sort of settings to kind of like, this is almost the default view when you create a Twine. Is it looks like this, text with link text to click. And so she has a scene here, this scene, sort of this passage right here, and then she provides a couple links to different passages. And so we click ignore him. And we get another scene or another passage with another option. Now this one she only has one. Again, another scene or a passage along with more links. So we get a passage of text and a couple links. And that's, that's pretty much the basic way you can create, or the basic thing you can create with Twine. And I found that students really enjoy it. And I had students say that it was like the most fun writing project, specifically they said writing project, that they've ever had in a class. And so that right there, she just wrote and included links, and the tool kind of does most of the sort of coding work for you, although you're able to do more if you want to. I want to look at another sample. This is another student of mine, Bailey Pattinson, who wrote sort of a more sort of essayistic kind of blurring with fiction, sort of about stress. and anxiety. And again, and notice that she kind of like, instead of including the links elsewhere, she actually embedded the links in her Twine. And so again, on both of these, what we have is a student kind of having a passage with links. And it's very straightforward, sort of internet, like hypertext web page looking thing, that allows them to kind of express a narrative in a way that maybe they're not used to doing, but is more familiar to the way they experience narratives. Does that make sense? I hope. Um, so that's what I want us to kind of do is like one of the things that I like to do is I give them the assignment of creating a sort of their own sort of narrative based Twine, and I got a wide number of examples. And the thing that was really cool for me as a teacher was grading them. Uh, grading sort of the grunt work that we don't necessarily always enjoy. But I really enjoyed grading all of these Twines and kind of exploring them in different ways, because I could tell students were really engaged with it. But as I also said earlier, you can also use this to create your own material if you're interested. And I want to show a quick example of a friend of mine, and I can actually share this website with you. My colleague, Dr. Margaret Sullivan, she taught women writers at Marshall University this past spring, and one of the things that she wanted to do was using Virginia Woolf. Wanted to kind of teach students about Virginia Woolf, and so she created a game about Virginia Woolf. And the link, so if you want to open it up and explore it a little bit while I'm kind of talking over it, we have a sort of opening, sort of introduction. So a little bit more like the student knows this is more of a lesson. Even having objectives, sort of like what we're going to learn. So very straightforward, kind of getting everything set up for the students. So they know how to kind of view this material. And then when you get started, what I think is really interesting is she actually set it up to sort of explore the house, Virginia Woolf's writing desk. You can look at her desk. And she has all these links to different things that she wrote. And again, it's all sort of these passages with some links. Sometimes she even links out to other sources. And one of the things that's really neat about this is how much, you very easily, not easily, but you could put this all on a static piece of paper, like or you could put it on a scrollable web page. But I think the act of allowing students to kind of click around and kind of explore a space in that allows students to kind of maybe be a little bit more engaged with the material. And so you can create your own material for students, but you can also assign students to create works to measure their understanding. All right. Okay. Yeah. And so this was, like I said, Dr. Sullivan had this. And this is actually, now we're going to kind of start shifting to looking at Twine. This right here is kind of what her Twine looks like under the hood, as it were. All of those pages that I showed you in all of the Twines, those all exist as these sort of squares, basically. They are passages of text. These squares are those passages. And the arrows here are representing those different links that we clicked on. Links can go one way, as they do up here, where it goes from Finding Virginia to What You'll Learn to Why a Wolf, kind of walking us through to kind of set up. And then notice once we get to actually starting, if you look at the This Is It up here in the middle, we actually have multiple ways of going around this Twine, sort of exploring the topic of Virginia Woolf there. Oh, I'm glad you're loving this stuff. So Sarah, I like that question. That's really cool. One thing you can really do, I think you could, as long as, so I'm not very familiar. Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah, it's like, I think the under the hood, yeah, it can, once you got to see, like, it's very straightforward how to use it, but like you look at the thing that it creates, it looks a little bit more complex than the thing that, so as far as using Twine and kind of embedding it in Google Docs, I'm not very familiar with Google Docs, but I'm pretty sure, can you insert a code block into a Google Docs web page or Google Docs document? Like, can you insert an HTML code block? Does anyone know if you can do that? You can embed code. Okay, that's the you can. So what you can do, and what my colleague did actually, she created a Wix site, and she embedded her game on her Wix site so that students could access it. So you could theoretically do it that way. I know I had for our final projects in my digital literary studies class where we made twines. We also looked at electronic literature and did a bunch of other stuff. They had a digital portfolio at the end, and I required them to embed it onto their webpage so that it would look a little bit like more professional, and you could play it on the page. Yeah, so yeah, if you can embed code like on a Google site, then you should be able to do that. That's all you need to be able to do. Because when you export it, you'll see you get like just a bunch of HTML, and you can just copy that into any sort of embed code block for any software that you have. Yeah, okay. I love like the interaction that's happening outside of me talking on the thing. That's really neat. Sort of side conversations about it too. All right, so you all seem pretty interested and primed for this, so it's great. I want to talk a little bit about using Twine today, and I want us to kind of build our own Twines in this session. What I want us to do is kind of think of what we had for breakfast today. And I want to cover three things just to get you started. Linking passages, formatting your text, which is very simple, and then saving your projects, which can be a little weird depending on sort of how you're trying to access stuff. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to give you all a few minutes. Oh no. Yes, Sophie, Don't apologize. I love the fact that there's like a side conversation going on with folks. That's kind of the point, right? This type of venue allows me to kind of go through my stuff, but you all to not have to, like, you all can like engage with parts of it as you are comfortable. So yeah, no apologies necessary. What I'd like you to do right now, though, I'll give you all like 3 minutes. I want you to either write down or pull up a document and type it up. Just basically what you did this morning, your morning routine. For instance, let me just make sure I've not been looking at my thing here. My notes here. Yeah. Basically, what I want to do is kind of create fodder, as my creative nonfiction professor always likes to tell me, stuff to kind of go in the thing we want to create. Take a few minutes, and I want you to write down or type out what you did this morning, just sort of in the first couple hours after you woke up. So you're going to do two things: write out a few of the things you did, and then go back and just kind of make a list of alternative choices you could have made. And don't overthink this. This is very straightforward. Like, for example, I woke up and had a bowl of cereal and a cup of coffee this morning. I could have had a bagel and a cup of tea as an alternative. Just basically trying to think of giving stuff that so you don't have to think of it in a little bit. Go through your morning, the first hour or two. What was your morning routine? What did you do, and maybe some alternate choices of what you could have done. I just wanted you to have some things in mind. Telling a simple story with choices. And so I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes just to kind of write that out. And again, just the things you did this. I just dropped something. The things you did this morning, and some alternate choices of things I guess you could have done. Oh yeah. So if you're looking at your comment there, you can use this. Obviously I use it in sort of English and literature focused classes, but I could see this working in pretty much any topic where you want to either deliver a lesson or have students kind of make something to kind of just demonstrate their work. And you can do a lot more with Twine than I want to even be able to cover here. But yeah. Okay. So has everyone had enough time to kind of just jot down some ideas of things that they did this morning and alternate choices they could have made? All right. If you have, um, all right. What I'd like you to do now is go to, I want to have you go to a website and kind of work alongside me here. Yeah. If y'all could open up a new tab or a window and go to twinery.org. This is sort of the home of the Twine software. As you can see on my page here, it's an open source tool for telling interactive nonlinear stories. The nonlinear part, kind of looking at electronic literature, is kind of one of the big aspects that's really fun with this. Now you can download it for a variety of systems. I actually just usually have my students click use it online. What that does is it saves it in your browser. One thing I want to mention before we go any further is if you're looking up tutorials or help of any type for Twine, you'll usually want to specify if you're looking for Twine 2, which is the current version, or Twine 1. They made a bunch of changes when they did the new version, Twine 2. And of course, some folks weren't as happy with those changes. So they leave Twine 1 up, but I use Twine 2, and it's there's no problems. It's fine. Just when looking for help and tutorials, you'll want to specify. So what I want us to do now with this is I want to actually just have you kind of play around with what it looks like. And so just want to click use it online. There's a few things here to kind of do not click skip. Actually, tell me more. It tells you a little bit about Twine. It has a guide. And very importantly here is this message right here. Basically what it does is it saves your work in your browser's cache. So if you clear your cache, CACHE, it'll delete your work if you're using the online version. If you download the software, it's different. But if you're using the online version, it will delete your work if you clear your cache. Also, anyone that accesses your computer and goes to twinery.org would have access to yours. And if you go on someone else's computer, you don't have access to your Twine because it's only on your computer. Once you've looked at that, if you go here to the story list, just kind of look around, look at the options. We're going to, here in a minute, create a new story. But first know that you can import HTML files after you've saved a Twine. You can archive things. I'm not going to go into that right now. You can change story formats. This is a little bit too much for us today. Don't worry about it. But these are things to kind of think about and look into later. Before I kind of move on from that, are there any questions about accessing the website or anyone having trouble with it? If there are, please just throw your question or your issue in the chat. I'll try to troubleshoot it. Once everyone's kind of just looked at that. Oh, yeah. I've used it on a Chromebook. Again, same issues apply. If it's a school-issued Chromebook, I'm going to guess in this case, because I know a lot of West Virginia schools use Chromebooks. At the end of the semester, they wipe them, don't they? And if they do that, then it'll delete their work. During this semester, it'll just save it in the browser. As long as no one else logs in and wipes the computer, it should be okay. What you may want to have students do is we'll have to probably publish to file, which I'll show here in a minute, to kind of save the HTML, and then there'll be a workaround where they'll have to save it to their Google Drive, but I think you can save it. Privacy-wise, all the work's saved on in their browser on their computer. You're not uploading it to the cloud or anything. If you save it to their Google Drive, if a student saves it to their Google Drive, they're like saving it to that cloud. But otherwise, like all of this is done in the browser. None of it's done like it doesn't go to the cloud or anything. Does that make sense? Is that the question you're kind of asking about, Sarah, with regards to privacy? Okay, yeah. It's all done in your browser, which is why like I think it's useful to kind of like do it that way because it's easier for students to get started. Um, and especially if they have like a Chromebook where they can't install things, that's helpful. But then it does create those other issues with like trying to manage it. But yeah, you can. I'll show you how to save it later. They'll just have to save it to their Google Drive every time they work on it, and then re-upload it to Twine to work on it. All right. So I want to real basically kind of get you all started and show you what we're doing. So what I want to do here is I'm going to first click on new story plus story. I'm just going to call mine test. And what you have here is a passage. Remember I was talking about those scenes, those passages? That's what we kind of have here. Now, Sarah, you had mentioned about saving work. This published a file down here. We'll get to, remind me to show you that at the end, and that'll be how students can save their work to like their Google Drive. So once you've created a passage, and you can keep clicking plus passage down here to create a bunch of passages. And then you can also delete all of your passages. Basically, all you need to do is, so I'm going to title my scene here for sake of clarity as passage 1. Because I'm very unimaginative, I think. And so now this is passage 1. And so if I created a new passage, let's say that I want to create 2 choices. I want to create a passage 1A and a passage 1B to represent 2 choices. So for instance, did I have coffee or tea? And so I'll make passage 1A. And I'll make passage 1B. Now, pretty much all of these things, you just need to double click it to open it, and then you type in your text. Now, I have 3 passages there, and our goal is probably to get to, let's say, passage 2, because this is, as I said, the most unimaginative way I can do this. 2 and so I have my passages here. So how do we link them? And the linking is probably the part that creates the most like trouble, just because that's the only part where you have to really kind of think, okay, what am I doing? I just want to first look at the chat before we kind of move on to linking. Okay, is there an age in the Stephanie asked, is there an age in the user agreement? Are they accessing information? I don't believe there's an age that I saw. If you look around on the twinery.org site, you can see as far as information, you can, like, other than like the FAQ and help sections of Twine, that's what they would be accessing as far as information. Clearing students' cache and cookies is one of our first go-to. Okay, so yeah, so you'll definitely want to have them save their work every time, Sophie, instead of, so that way it'll have it, and I'll show you how to do that. Yeah, after you've published it to file, if you just drag it back into Twine, and I'll show you that, you can edit it again. So yeah, so it'll be a little bit more cumbersome because of like the worries when using Chromebooks, because you'll have to like constantly upload and download, but it'll be one of those things where after the first day they know what they're doing, they should be okay with getting it. And that's really like the most complicated. That's actually more complicated than the actual making of the Twine. Which, let's go back to that, because there's I don't think there are any other questions there. And so these two options, I want to go to passage 1A or passage 1B from passage 1. So I'm going to double click passage 1 and I want to say, where do you want to go? And I'm going to, the key thing to do when you want to link passages is hit the bracket twice. And notice here, once I start typing passage, it's like, oh, you have all these passages here. So passage 1A. And then I'll say, or, and then I'll hit brackets again. And as soon as I hit passage, oh, it's okay, passage 1B. So I want to go there. And if you look back now, I've created two links there. And so if I go to passage 1A, let's say that passage 1A is the correct choice. You have made the correct choice. Proceed to, again, I want to put the passage 2 in the sentence. So I'll just hit bracket twice and hit P for passage 2. And I'll put a period there. And now we'll see that that's right there. This is passage 2. This is passage 1B. You will say that's the wrong choice for just the sake of this presentation. And I want to hit bracket. And one of the things I want to do here is I don't want it to say passage 1. I want to change it so where it says home, but I want it to go to passage 1. So I'm just going to type the word home. And then I'm going to type a dash, basically an arrow. And I'm going to link to passage 1. And so what this will do is create a link back to passage 1, but it'll say home. All right. Is everyone kind of following so far? Are there any questions so far? I'm going to show you what it looks like here in a second. I just want to make sure everyone kind of is following what I'm doing. I don't want to move too fast. All right. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat as always. Okay. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally. So if you're having trouble linking, bracket key on your keyboard. That's the main thing to do. And so if you see here, the only thing that you need to be finicky with is you have to use the exact name of the passage. And so, so I want to go to passage 1A or passage 1B, or just go to, and again, the bracket key on the keyboard next to the letter P, hit it twice to open. And then once you start typing the name of the passage, it should just kind of pop up. And notice now I've created a link to passage 2. Basically, anything in the brackets is going to be the basic thing to always remember with this is I'm putting something in the chat here. Is in your brackets, double brackets, the name of the passage. That creates a link to that passage. Does that help, Sophie? Were you able to get it to work? Is anyone else having any issues? All right, great. I love that. Also love the enthusiasm. Yay. So yeah, so that's really all you have to do. And so what we can do is we can actually wait, did I share my screen? I did not share my screen. All right. And so what we can do is we can once we have this story, we can click play, and here's my story. This is passage 1. Where do you want to go? Well, I want to go to passage 1A. Apparently that was correct. And notice how I embedded the link in the sentence. This is passage 2. Oh, it's broken, so I can't go back. I need to fix that. Twine does have, unfortunately, like a go back button built into the software, which is useful because I just forgot, and so do a lot of students. And so now if I go in here and say I want to start again or start over, and again I'm going to use that arrow thing, and now it'll create a link back to passage 1. See? And go to passage 2 in this thing, and oh, didn't pop up on me. Oh, I think I have to. Oh. So yeah, so you can click through here. I'll have to see why that didn't click. Oh, there it is. Start over. And now I'm back on passage 1. Okay. All right. So that's very straightforward, I hope. What I'd like you all to do is I ask you all to write down sort of like, your morning routine today. I'd like you all to just take a moment, because I think one of the things that's always helpful is to just try it, so that way you can kind of, if you run into issues, much as like you ran into there, Sophie, uh, we can get it fixed right now. So what I'd like you to do is just create a simple twine where you're kind of walking through your morning routine, but with the alternative. So I had coffee in a cup of coffee and a bowl of cereal, but I can make the choice to have bagel and tea. No, that's okay. Curious why you're not using the link option in the toolbar. Probably because I'm used to doing it one way. That's my guess. Let me look really quick, because I used Twine 1, and if that's a little bit easier way for you to use it, then go right ahead. The link thing, looking at it, yeah, I can see why I never used it. It is a little bit more complex. I'll show everyone so that way everyone knows kind of what's up. So like I'm in my Twine here, and I have these, and if I click, if I have my cursor down here, if I click link, I get all of this. And it allows you to, yeah, you can create a hyperlink, which means you can go to a web page or somewhere outside of your Twine. You can have a bunch of options basically here. I encourage you to explore those options anytime you need to or want to. For our purposes today, I just want to show sort of like how to create a simple branching narrative. The reason why I don't use the link on or talk too much about the link option there is because I don't use it that often. I'll just be honest. And I don't want to like overwhelm you with like possibilities to prevent you from like using it, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Uh, there are there are even ways to set up like inventory systems. Like I've had students like have Twine games where they create it where you like would pick up things along the narrative, um, like torches and stuff to kind of explore caves. Uh, so yeah, so there's a lot of what's what I'm thinking of. There's a lot of flexibility to the system and to the software, and it has a lot to do. I'm just showing sort of like level 1 sort of basics there. Yeah, the brackets is it's just very straightforward. Yeah, I just want to just let everyone kind of, you're free to explore. If you look up tutorials and stuff, there are all kinds of stuff for it. The other thing I would want to show you that I would want to show you is another basic, relatively so, thing that I talk to my students about, because my students, when we do this, and so like I have them make a Twine game. Um, I have it's a for a digital literary studies course. So we study electronic literature and we make electronic literature. And in that course, one of the things that comes up is I have a population of students with sort of diverse backgrounds in the terps. Sorry. Sort of diverse backgrounds. So therefore, some are really strong writers, and the tech part using the software is more of a challenge. For other students, they're really strong with the tech part. Like they've used a lot of software. They may know coding. So that part's really easy for them. They pick up on it right away. But then the writing is the actual part that's difficult. So yeah, so there's a lot of things you can do with it. One of the things I would show just real quick is that I have students do is using the different sort of formatting, bolding, italicizing, things like that, adding color. You can do things like this relatively straightforward. Those first kind of 4 things here, just to kind of make it look a little different. But obviously, your best help with doing more complex things is using Google to kind of just search for answers. Now, real quick before we go, since we're running out of time, is I want to show how to save your work. So it'll look different if you're on a Mac or a PC, or if you're using Chrome or whatever browser. Basically, as I said, it stays here on your computer. If I clear my cache right now, it'll delete my story. If I go into my story, though, I can save it by publishing it to file. Now, I'm on a Mac in Safari, so it'll give me a big page of HTML. And if you get this, if you're on a Mac on Safari, you have to hit File and then Save As, and save it as the page source. Change it to HTML. And then you can open. Oh wait, yeah. There we go. And then you can open that again later. If you're on like a Chrome in Chrome, I believe when you hit publish to file, it actually just downloads an HTML file. Now that file is the one that you will want students to then use or to re-upload. And then you do that basically just by selecting import from file from the home screen. When you hit choose file, it should pop up with a desktop here. Test on HTML. Don't replace any stories. Notice, and there's the one I just saved, and there it is. Obviously, I can go over anything that needs to be, but I will, since we're wrapping up, kind of show you this. All right, there we go. Sorry. A link to a page that kind of walks us through doing what we just did. I've also I have a PDF I made of this presentation, and I added all my notes into it to make sort of an ebook. I don't know how to share that in the chat though, or how to share that with the group. Annalisa, do you know how I can share that with the group? All right. I'll tell you what, because I'm not sure how to share it.
I'm sorry, they're coming for some technical support. There isn't really any kind of way to share a file in there, but okay. I would be happy if they're interested, I could share their email of the people who attended this group, and you can send a link out to them, or you can put a link that's in the chat to a file.
Okay, well, yeah, let me share the file through iCloud or whatever, probably. I'll just create a shareable link, and then I can post that in the chat.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
All right. It'll take me a minute or two to set that up. Is this going to go away here automatically or anything?
No, I don't think so. We've got a couple more minutes, so.
Okay. So that's just the basics of what I was kind of wanting to show you today. Are there any questions while I try to set up the sort of shareable link thing here? Have any, please throw them Yes, you can include images, you have video and audio. The one that I showed earlier from one of my students was actually has some background audio that loads at the beginning of it, which I thought was really neat. Um, oh, I'm glad you learned something. Let me see if this works now. All right. So this link in the chat, if someone could click on that to make sure it works and make sure it doesn't do something weird, I would really appreciate it. Basically, what I did was I tried to basically I took my presentation here, which by the way, I guess I should plug Marshall Digital Humanities if you want more information for you or your students with Marshall's Digital Humanities efforts. You can visit them at marshall.edu/dh or email the director at dh@marshall.edu. Also, remember there's the West Virginia SCORES Academic Festival, which conveniently has this very similar title to this presentation. Yes, that's what I did. Basically, because I want to see a lot of your students presenting or sending in and submitting Twine games for me when it comes to the next year's SCORES Festival. So please do that. I would really like that. All right, Annalisa was able to get it. Link worked for you. Okay, yeah. All right. So that's basically it's that whole slide deck without the transitions. And I actually put in notes. If there are typos, I apologize. I was trying to. I wanted to give you as many of the resources that I have here. The links that are in the chat should all be in there as well. If something happens, you can't get it. All those links should be in that sort of ebook. If you have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and throw my email address in here. You can email me at rucker37@marshall.edu. I'd love to hear from you. I think that's all I have for today, and I guess our time's up, Annalisa. So if no one has any questions for me or comments, I thank you all so much for coming. Thank you all for being engaged and active, and it was fun. It's been a busy week and kind of that weird sort of summer. I don't see any colleagues hardly, and it's what am I doing? All right. Oh, great. I'm glad you liked it. Thank you.